So I use cannabis as often as I possibly can to treat the symptoms of OCD, anxiety, and PTSD, which I've suffered from for many years. I've suffered from those mental health problems for about a decade now. But I'm also in the unfortunate position of having been diagnosed with psychotic illnesses, i.e. schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, I should say, and a first episode psychosis back in 2015 now. And all the experiences that I've had related to psychosis and so on, I wouldn't have said that cannabis was the cause of those at all. I would have said that alcohol is far more likely to be the cause of those episodes, and alcohol withdrawal in particular, and for about the same length of time as one would expect. Alcohol has been I've been addicted to alcohol. I've been an alcoholic in the past 10 years. And luckily now I've managed to reduce my addiction to alcohol or eliminate it entirely. I still have a drink here and there, but I mean, it's not so much of a problem as it used to be. But yeah, I've never noticed any psychotic symptoms arising directly as a result of using cannabis. I would have said that psychotic symptoms arise very much as a result of alcohol withdrawal. And that's well documented. You can, if you have a serious alcohol addiction, it does cause, voice hearing experiences, hallucinations, all these sorts of things when you try to quit cold turkey, as I did on many different occasions. And yeah, you kind of you definitely experience something like psychosis when you're going through alcohol withdrawal. But I'm in the unfortunate position now where I can't get my hands on medical cannabis because I have a psychotic illness in my history, and there's this persistent myth going around that cannabis causes psychosis, so that cannabis is involved in 50% of schizophrenia diagnoses or something like this. And this is because it hangs around in the body for long enough for it to show up on blood tests and so on. So they only consider cannabis a risk factor, whereas they downplay heavily the likelihood that alcohol or other drugs is involved in that also. And I'm on the antipsychotic medications now, right? So I've been on those medications for 6 months or so via a depot injection. And all the beliefs that I've had in the past about people trying to murder me, for instance, at the University of East Anglia, which is the reason I first got sectioned under the Mental Health Act. I called the police on my flatmates and they ended up sectioning me. They actually planted drugs on me as well in my backpack because one of the people I accused of having conspired to murder me at the University of East Anglia was a former police officer. I still believe that there was foul play going on there. I still believe that those things were really occurring. So are they delusions or not? I'm sure from the perspective of some people it would be very attractive to portray those things as delusions. But still, I mean, I'm in the most non-psychotic state I can possibly be in at the moment. I've had an inordinate amount of time to constantly go over the events of the past to try and figure out what was happening in the past and reappraise my beliefs and so on and so forth. And I've still come back to the same conclusions. I still think that somebody meant to harm me by spiking me with whatever, was in the can of lager that I was given at this house party or this flat party on the UEA campus back in 2014. So none of that's really gone away. And why is it a delusion to say that I got spiked by somebody? Is that a delusion? Is it my idea that people were trying to get me to fall down a flight of stairs while spiking me, which is what I also believe? Is that a delusion? Why is it a delusion? A delusion is something that must be proven incontrovertibly false. It must be undermined by incontrovertible evidence or rational argument to the contrary to be correctly defined as a delusion. And this is something that the NHS mental health thought police fascist brigade have repeatedly gotten wrong. They don't understand psychosis very well, I don't think. They don't understand mental illness very well. They repeatedly say it's kind of like a false belief. That's what it is. They'll dumb it down and simplify it and get away from the real diagnostic criteria for things like delusions and just go psychosis, psychosis, psychosis. And once you've got that on your record, you can't get hold of medical cannabis, so I have to get it off the black market and treat myself that way for OCD, anxiety, and PTSD. And it's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare. Like, the substance helps me a great deal with my mental health. That's the problem with this. But it's in their way of thinking, they have this kind of paranoia, frankly, and delusion more than likely that it causes psychosis. I mean, from what my understanding of cannabis-induced psychosis is that it's incredibly rare among cannabis users. I think there's about 2 or 3 million cannabis users in the United Kingdom at the moment. I think there's about 30,000 or so hospital admissions due to psychotic illness every year. So 50% of those involve cannabis, apparently. And just by doing a back of the envelope calculation there, you can sort of see how the number of people being admitted to hospital with psychosis involving cannabis is incredibly small compared to the population who actually use cannabis. But then again, like, there's people who get admitted to, and I know this from first-hand experience of having been many times admitted to psychiatric hospitals. Many people in there, they're using all sorts of things other than cannabis. I'm sure they're using cannabis here and there as well, but like lots of people in there, they're using crack cocaine or heroin or whatever else it is, or they're using strong hallucinogens like LSD, or they're using ketamine or cocaine or whatever else. And I've used a few of those things myself in the past. I've used cocaine before. I've used not heroin. What else have I used? Well, I've used cocaine before. What else have I used that might cause psychosis? I haven't used LSD either. What the thing is also, in the year that I first got sectioned under the Mental Health Act, I believe that I was spiked with PCP or something similar in my tobacco, and that I spiked a second time in addition to being spiked the first time when I almost fell down a flight of stairs. And I believe that people there were trying to deliberately induce psychosis in me. I also had a huge drinking problem at the time and was at one point trying to go cold turkey from alcohol. So I still believe that alcohol was a very large risk factor in causing the psychosis that I suffered from. I'm sure, and I went there complaining of OCD as well and PTSD due to having been spiked, and they didn't believe any of that, or they didn't take any of that seriously. And as I said, the police planted drugs on me, probably because I said there's a former police officer or a police officer who was at the University of East Anglia, this guy called Miles Cooper Bradley, who I was sharing a flat with. Because I tried to implicate him in all this, they just said, oh, it's psychosis, and planted drugs on me, saying there's a drug-induced psychosis. You're just babbling nonsense. Which is corruption, of course. And I've tried to bring this to light many times in the past, and no one's taken me seriously because everyone in servile fashion just believes what the NHS say and doesn't take my side of the story seriously at all. And it's one of these instances where the false implication or the false indication of mental health problems has been used to try and obscure criminality coming from people who ought to know better, such as police officers. And that is the truth, unfortunately. That's what really happened. There's this other narrative that goes along with that, but I just went mental or something for an extended period of time and just made it all up somehow in my head. Except when I'm on a more stable, even keel at the moment somehow, I still believe the same things. And I'm heavily medicated with strong antipsychotic medications at the moment, and I still believe the same thing. So those medications, the antipsychotics, those are supposed to cure delusions and any psychotic symptoms, right? Except they haven't clearly. So surely the implication there is that I'm not delusional and telling the truth. Or is that not the implication? I don't know sometimes. I don't know what goes on in the minds of other people. But yeah, I mean, I know delusions, frankly, are pretty common among people, actually. And unfortunately, when it comes to things like cannabis and psychosis, people very, very often have no idea at all about what they're talking about. They downplay the fact that it has any medical uses whatsoever, in spite of the fact that cannabis has been used medicinally since at least the time of the ancient Greeks in the West, and almost certainly far earlier than that. It was made illegal in 1921 to protect the profits of pharmaceutical companies while they were selling aspirin, paracetamol and ibuprofen, and when those products started coming online. Then there's also the issue that Rockefeller in the United States heavily funded smear campaigns against the cannabis plant and its use in agriculture because he was scared of it harming his profits in the oil industry, and spread this nefarious nonsense via Southern Baptist faith communities, churches in the United States, and got the religious on his side, and that's how that happened, more or less. But it's a deeply frustrating thing for me to have to go through, since my own experience with mental health has been lifelong, protracted. It goes back until I was very young, when I started suffering from mental health problems that I couldn't pin down exactly. When I was a kid, I suffered very abusive relationships in the home when I was growing up. Started using cannabis when I was about 15 as a means of self-medicating. Again, self-medicating against the traumas that I'd built up during childhood. And it caused no psychotic symptoms then when I was 15. It caused no psychotic symptoms when I was 20, I wouldn't have said. However, curiously, the psychotic symptoms only kicked in far later on at the University of East Anglia, when I started suffering from psychosis then. Or really what I had was a sort of breakdown, I think. Or it just got to a point where I was too suspicious of the people around me to keep going on there in in reasonable terms, and ended up calling the police on them and trying really to get help about this issue of them spiking me, which had happened twice at that point. And obviously the police gave me no help whatsoever, planted drugs on me, had me sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Go figure. And the treatment that you get in the NHS for mental health problems is absolutely diabolical. They threaten you with sectioning unless you take the antipsychotic medications. I've stopped taking the antipsychotic medications on many occasions, and that's what's led to repeated sectioning, really, because they cook up any kind of reason that they could fathom to say that you're having a relapse of psychosis. Or they arbitrarily diagnose you more or less with psychosis based on one of the three categories that might imply a psychotic break or something, such as formal thought disorder, delusions, and hallucinations, and they wangle the definitions in those three categories to the greatest extent that they possibly can to try and have you sectioned again. Because I don't know, on a certain level, I think it's also because they want to outwardly show or try and demonstrate that there's a crisis in mental health in the country, or there's a mental health epidemic or something like this, which means that they keep getting funding from central government, they keep the hospitals open, they don't suffer cuts under Tory spending plans and what have you. and they're just trying to justify their own existence within the system, which is barely justifiable anyway, since they treat you like dirt. They don't diagnose properly. They don't treat you properly with, the respect and with the respect you deserve really as a patient. They have not all that great knowledge of mental health in any case, and they just think that the whole panoply of mental disorders can be distilled down to psychosis, and that any variant of any mental health problem amounts to psychosis in their minds. And this problem is even worse in the community, in society at large, who have a piss poor understanding of mental health in any case, when they think, that you're just, whenever you're saying something that they dislike or something, it's with, have you taken your medication? And it's like, ugh, God. I have to deal with like creepy, fucking disgusting, vile wretches who just discriminate heavily against people with mental illnesses, for one thing, and who I think that they have some sort of license thereafter to put themselves on a pedestal and think that they're somehow have greater cognitive abilities than you or something like this, or that you're impaired on some kind of neurodevelopmental level where you're kind of like a mentally handicapped person or something like this. I don't know what it is, and they get to treat you like a second-class citizen. And that has been my experience going through mental health services. It's been one of having my sense of self and my sense of status within the community abased, and I've been marginalised and dehumanised, and that's how I feel about my treatment. And yeah, it's the treatment is classically far worse than the disorders themselves. What you have to go through, it just keeps adding to the trauma. It keeps adding on to the symptoms. It keeps manufacturing more mental health problems which get labelled as psychosis as opposed to PTSD or something else, and they keep doing this to you. They keep traumatizing you more, keep adding on more abuse, really, to manufacture mental health problems, make you worse, make sure you get readmitted to hospital instead of cured, so that they can keep their admission statistics up and keep sucking money out of the system via central government. Whereas I think 90% of the mental health institutions in the UK could be gotten rid of entirely, and people could be treated in the community, in most cases, with cannabis, as opposed to without cannabis. I have a theory that cannabis is probably also an antipsychotic. The reason being because I think in the cases of severe patients who I've encountered, one or two do suffer from psychosis properly and schizophrenia properly, and in the cases of people like that, cannabis would work very, very, very effectively at helping them with their disorder. And that's just from having many years experience of using cannabis myself, having many experienced people who have used cannabis. It would most certainly dampen down psychotic symptoms, in my opinion. And people who like to say that it doesn't, I don't know what to say sometimes. I really don't. Like, the extent to which people will dig their heels in over this issue is really, really dramatic in my mind. I've never come across anything quite like it. It's 100% symptomatic of delusion, actually, that they're so committed to a false belief such as this. And it's very, it's a constant battle, isn't it? And trying to inculcate a common sense approach to treating the mentally ill and trying to improve society's attitude towards drug taking and things like this. But yeah, I don't know what to say very often. The best I can do is just to, you know, say what my credentials are, which is as someone who's gone through the system of mental health treatment, which is appalling, and the medications, well, I mean, do they work? Am I delusional now? Am I psychotic now? I mean, this is like what people will do very often. Very often people would say that I am psychotic now, or that I am delusional at the moment, and, you know, seek to tar me with that even though I'm on medication. Because I'm saying something that they dislike, or I'm saying something which, in their opinion, they regard as crazy. But no, I think probably one of the most useful medicines that we're failing to utilise at its optimum is cannabis for the treatment of all mental health problems, or the majority of mental health problems. And every single patient I've ever encountered in any psychiatric institute whatsoever is suffering from a grand spectrum of mental health problems, all in a comorbid complex of mental health problems that doesn't include schizophrenia and psychosis. And maybe they have psychotic features to their disorder as well, but they almost certainly suffer from things like OCD, PTSD, anxiety, in addition to that. And the anxiety, PTSD, and OCD, those act as driving forces for things like psychosis. That is also documented in the medical literature. But there we go. Who gives a fuck about that? Again, when it comes to the practitioners themselves, in my experience, psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses and so on, they don't actually know these sorts of things. They don't actually have a very good handle on the medical literature. They don't know much about mental health at all, really, because they go through university trying to get the easiest possible job they can get in healthcare, which for loads of them, and psychiatry is really competitive for this reason, because it offers a good work-to-life balance. It offers them, up to 6 figures in terms of a pay packet and a 9 to 5 sort of work-life balance, and Monday to Friday where they, don't have to be in theatre and whatever, and actually saving people's lives, and they can just sort of float around in the mental health part of the system and not do very much. And that's very attractive to a certain sort of medical student, I think. But this has gone on for too long already. What do I want to do? Like, categorize this as some deep dive on cannabis and medical and mental health. Medical health. Yeah. I think I've said almost everything I want to say. Yeah, I think psychosis also, and schizophrenia as well. The latest thinking on this in psychiatry is that these might be somewhat mythical categories of illness anyway, and that there might be more like a psychosis spectrum. There might not, schizophrenia itself might be a sort of a phantasm, more like, in terms of a mental illness. And I very much understand where people are coming from who think that. I've never experienced a split personality. I don't understand what it means. It's just one of these things that when you go into an institution like that, the only thing they understand or think they understand is psychosis and the psychotic illnesses. So that's the only diagnosis they give out. Or it's the diagnosis they give to almost everybody who goes through those places. And it's just, that's the only thing that they know how to deal with. So it's a travesty, but there we go. That's been my deep dive on cannabis and mental health, and the lovely, beautiful, transcendent sometimes experience that you can have using cannabis also aids the treatment of OCD, anxiety, PTSD, depression, helps with the symptoms of autism spectrum disorders, such as which I think I also have, probably. And that's been demonstrated widely, and cannabis has been made legal for those purposes. I can't fucking get hold of any because I think I've been misdiagnosed with psychosis and schizophrenia. I hate those words. Psychosis, schizophrenia. It's the way that they're applied. If you look at the statistics, by the way, between the native Dutch population, and the British population, we diagnose psychosis almost twice as frequently as they do in the Netherlands. That tells you something in and of itself, does it not? A huge amount of it is misdiagnosis, but there we go, whatever.